First of all, good morning to everyone. Turn to page 786, please. 786, it's not the beginning of the parasha, but it's the middle of the parasha. This is a lengthy parasha that describes the designation of the Levim and their role. Things are set in motion for the actual departure from Mount Sinai, and we spent a long time there at Mount Sinai. We were there close to 12 months minus 10 days, and only on the 20th of Iyar did we depart Mount Sinai, and we were all ready. Things were set in motion. We knew how to encamp, we knew that we had direction, we had a tabernacle, we had everything ready to go and make our way into Eretz Israel and they could come in. Welcome. No. What do we do there? Come in.
Yeah, there's lots of seats.
Plenty of seats in front.
Where Florence? Go by Florence.
Sorry.
Don't be sorry. We're happy to have you here. You're welcome. Bruchim habayim. So we're in Parshas Behaaloscha, page 786. We are talking about a nation that is ready to make its way to the land of Israel. And then everything starts going wrong. We begin the process of complaining. There's a spiritual fall. And that is described from page 786 and on. So up until page 786, things are overall set in motion for a wonderful journey. And page 786, you can imagine as the arrival at Pearson, where everything starts becoming a mess, right? And you're caught, going into the United States with an apple, and they pull you into a room, and you're there for 45 minutes. It all starts right here on page 786. Now, in the past, we focused on the fact that after that, the word asaf appears many, many times. Asaf, to gather, where we have a group of people that are identified as the asaf suf. These are people that are the rabble who are complaining. And then the nation is provided with elders who were ne'esaf, who were gathered. And then we after a request they made for meat, they were given these birds and they had to collect them, asaf. So that's what we focused on in the past. But this year, what we're going to try to do at least today, is focus a little bit on what is occurring in the middle of page 786, where we have the psukim, Vayehi bin Soa Ha'aron Vayomer Moshe. So these are words that ring a bell because we sing them every single Shabbat, and it is a song in honor of the Ark, and therefore we use it to greet the Holy Ark into the synagogue itself. So we start off Vayehi. So this is page 786, verse 35. Vayehi bin Soa Ha'aron. And when the Ark would journey, Vayomer Moshe would cry out or would say, Kuma Hashem, right? Go ahead, Hashem, arise. V'yafutzu oyevecha, may your foes be scattered. V'yanusu, and the ones who misanecha, who hate you, they should flee mipanecha, from your presence. So the first part of the verse talks about, the first verse of Vayehi bin Soa Aaron talks about the journey of the Aaron, the journey of the Holy Ark, the journey of the people of Israel, because we symbolize that Ark and we carry it with us at every destination. The enemies should disperse. The second verse, Venucho Yomar, which we actually say when the Ark is returned, but it refers to the idea that the people of Israel, although we have this journey where we will be facing enemies, but nevertheless be protected, and there's a guarantee that whatever we symbolize will continue to exist. However, nevertheless, we are a religion of optimism. We are a religion that believes that eventually things will be settled. Things will be settled. Right? Even in the Middle East, we believe things will be settled, not by this brilliant, huge deal maker, but rather someone from above, right, will be taking that role of settling things. And it will settle with the Rivivot Alfei Israel, with the thousands, the myriads of thousands of Israel. Things will settle. So these two verses are very significant. What you notice, number one, is the fact that they are in parentheses. However, this is not a regular parenthesis, but rather two letters that were placed here to circle these two verses, which are the two nuns we're familiar with. You see the upside down nun? Now, it's not that the printers couldn't find a parenthesis and they just grabbed from one of the cases some letter nuns and put them in. It is the letter nun for a reason. Nun symbolizes something, and the letter nun is placed before this verse and after these verses. That's piece of information number one. Number two, it is in Talmudic literature, it's extremely significant, these two verses, where the rabbis say that these two verses are considered like a complete book. And what significance does it have that it's considered a whole book? We are told that if, let's say, it's Shabbat and there's a fire and you want to start saving goods, well, you have to know what you could transfer from domain to domain, what not. There are leniencies when it's a holy scroll. When it's a holy scroll, there are some leniencies where it would be permissible to transfer from the private to the semi-public domain as long as the scroll still has letters. If it is a scroll from hundreds of years ago and the letters all popped off, it no longer has sanctity. So the Talmud asks, how many letters have to remain on the scroll to consider it still a sanctified or a holy scroll? And the Talmud tells us 85 letters. How did the rabbis get the number 85? So they say, well, there's actually a book in Tanakh that has 85 letters, and therefore the number 85 is the proper number. What is that book? These two verses. So the rabbis give it great significance, and we need to clarify the significance of these verses, but even more than that, what on earth is the letter Nun all about? Okay, that's what we're going to try to clarify. The letter Nun, and why is it here? Because the letter Nun is giving us a little bit of insight into what these verses are telling us. When you come to shul, you have to prepare yourself. And one of the most important things that is good to prepare yourself with is with speed reading. Because there are times that we are going way faster than the speed limit, and if you want to go ahead and be right in the proper track, you have to be sure to be able to run through some things fast. There's nothing as fast as an ashrei, it seems like, at least to me. And for example, you come to a mincha service, right? And I come and you start saying ashrei. Maybe in the ashrei, as you know, works in alphabetic order. Sometimes I'm by the letter chet, and that's it. Time's up. The guy reading it is over. This is a reality that exists. In the morning as well, we have a second ashrei we have two ashreis in the morning. One in Psukei de Zimra, one towards the end of the tefillah. But then already people are speeding things up, so you have to train yourself to get your ashrei a little bit fast. Unfortunately, it's a very significant prayer. The rabbis use this word, this term, that you should know that if a person says the ashrei 3 times a day, he merits a portion in the world to come. So it seems like it's important. Judaism is not big into just uttering words and everything works out, right? We don't have our hails and we don't work like that. Obviously, there must be a deeper meaning, that if there's something the rabbis tell us that when said, you are in good shape, it must be that you have to take a message from it. You have to think into it. What does it symbolize? What does it represent? And make that part of your life, right? Uttering words don't work. It's not the Jewish, at least not the track of Judaism we relate to. So what's ashrei all about? So the order of the letters play a role. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Asher, Shevetecha, Yud, Chasela, right? Tila, Levi, Aromimcha, I shall praise you. B'chol Yom, right? God is great, right? His glory. It talks about the glory of God, but it reminds us that just as there's an order in this chapter of Tehillim, so too there is order in nature, there's order in history, and there is order in existence. We do not believe that all of our existence here is random, right? That we got here by mistake, and therefore we are not those who are 100% sure that somewhere out there in the universe there is someone else like us. Because if you believe in randomness, and you believe that the universe is huge, so obviously there is another location where this random occurrence took place. If you believe in randomness, you will obviously believe that the most important thing to do as an ethical person is to preserve the universe, and therefore fighting global warming should be a number one priority, because your existence here is a mistake or just a random occurrence, and therefore anything that will disrupt this random occurrence is what you should be fighting more than anything else, and that should be your mission in life. If you believe in random existence, you don't believe that history has purpose, right? If you believe in random existence and you're sitting there as a Jew in Europe and you're reading the books of the Tanakh and it talks about a return to Zion one day, it's absurd, it's impossible. Because it's not possible that you have a nation that lives in little shtetl, right, that doesn't even, that believes, can't pick up a weapon because it believes it's tameh, and to say that such a nation will one day have a homeland in Eretz Yisrael where the majority of Jews are going to be in Israel, these are absurd concepts, because in the random things, the way randomness is supposed to occur, we're supposed to perhaps exist, perhaps vanish, but a homeland and a return, that's all that is impossible. Judaism believes that there's a purpose. Existence occurred, right? How long ago? It's not significant if it was 6,000 years ago or 13.7 billion years ago. In other words, how you read Bereshit, there are different options and different approaches. But that's not what's important. What's important is the belief that there was a creator, and the creator goes ahead and decides it's time for a big bang, and begin this process to create a world, and there's purpose in the world, and there's order. Nothing is random, and if there's a species that vanishes some time ago, it's the Almighty that has an interest that this species vanishes. And if there's a development of the Jewish people, there's a reason for it. There's order in nature, there's order in existence, and there's order to history. God's going to put everything together, and somehow it will make sense, and there's going to be a return to the land of Israel, and the Jews of Israel are going to go ahead and understand why they belong there, and then they will merit to have a structure that will serve as a hub, not just for themselves, but for humanity, and teach humanity to be about the God of Israel. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. Those letters don't fall in order, right? You play any game with cards, right, and you have 22 cards, they're not going to fall. I mean, I'm sure there is a possibility, and a mathematician will go ahead and tell me after how many times it's going to occur, but the reality is that this is a statement that we believe in order. You say it 3 times a day and you think about it, and you go out to the workplace, and there's challenge in the workplace, and there's challenge at home, and there's challenge in the synagogue, most probably too, I believe, right, Alan? Yeah. And you ask yourself, why on earth am I doing it? You're doing it because you are here to fulfill a mission. And we have a mission in this world, and therefore we deal better, by the way, with maturing and old age. We deal with that better. We should, at least. If we're deeply religious, we should deal with it well, because we're serving a purpose. We're doing something. We're making a contribution, right? It's not a random existence. And in a mall, you'll see a store called Forever 21. And that seems to be the ideal for some people. If I wish I could still be 21 again, right? And I still remember as a kid watching a movie of George Burns, Olav Shalom. And like, the dream would be if he could be 18 again. Like, that was the world. If you believe in randomness, and fun is only when you are young, when you can act like a Vilda Chaya, that is if you, on the other hand, you believe in purpose and existence and the contribution you can make. We respect elders in our tradition. And that is something that is quite inspiring. We have order, we believe in order. So therefore we say Ashrei. Now, the problem is that there's one letter, the letter that fell out of Ashrei. The Nun. The Nun. What happened to the Nun of Ashrei?
It's right there.
Thank you. There goes my class. Now, what happened? So what does the Nun of Ashrei, now what does it symbolize? So the Talmud tells us, you should know. You want to know what the Nun was about, because it's omitted for a reason. It's there. It's within the order of nature and it's within the order of history. However, we don't want to mention it, even though it's there, but there's reference to it in the next verse. What is the next letter after the nun is the samach, and we declare Somech Hashem lechol hanoflim, that the Almighty assists all those that nafal, that fell. In other words, part of the order of nature and part of the order of history is that there is a downfall. You don't grow unless you fall. And what really defines any successful person is how you deal with the fall. Right? When it comes to a businessman, when you go ahead and fall and you address it appropriately, right? You learn from it. That is how you grow and become a much better person. If on the other hand, the person who falls, right, spiritually, a business, but you go ahead and you're not willing to address it, right, and you double down, that is a very tragic and can be a tragic ending. Somech Hashem l'chol hanoflim. David HaMelech, right, we're so inspired by David HaMelech, but he had some problems there, but nevertheless he has inspired us for 3,300 years, 3,000 years, because he had the ability to deal with the mistake appropriately. And our heroes in Tanakh are the people that could go ahead and confront those issues, deal with them, address them, and move on. Because they have an understanding that, yes, I fall in life, but there's someone assisting me. We don't take pride in the fall, right? We go ahead and we try to conceal it. It's part of nature. We learn from it, and obviously we're going to make reference to it, but only in this Somech Hashem l'chol hanoflim. So nun symbolizes this idea of a fall. So far, so good. So here we have it. These two nuns here are going to tell us that these verses that are introduced here before they begin this optimistic journey. In other words, when you talk about the nation traveling, chapter 11 in the Tanakh here, in the Parashat Bamidbar, should have been the greatest chapter because they're leaving Har Sinai. They are guided by the cloud of glory. They're on their way to Eretz Israel. You're like all ready, right, for the crescendo to go ahead and reach that point. And what happens? Boy, is there a downfall. Major downfall after downfall. And the downfalls here are a symbol of other grand downfalls that occurred and are going to occur. Welcome to the Nun world. This is what it's all about. And it's going to be referred to in these psukim. Now let me explain what is the idea behind it. In Judaism, obviously we're not lovers of war. We're not lovers of war. And there's something to bemoan, or there's something to regret when we have to go to war. I remember I've shared here this story that we were once, a few years ago, I went on a rabbinic mission or tour, whatever you want to call it, to Israel, and it was we were a group of rabbis, right? We were 10 Orthodox rabbis, 10 conservative, 10 Reform. Okay, this is what the journey was, and it was an interesting experience. It was an opportunity to interact and deal. It was overall very, very, very positive, just for the record. And then we reached Yad Mordechai, southern Israel, and that was part of the group. And there was a tank there. And what happens if a young kid sees a tank? What do? It's not an operating tank. It is a tank from 1948, right? So what does a young kid do? Climb. So obviously I climbed on the tank, right? So I climbed on the tank, and, it was a lot of fun. And...
You're so self-deprecating.
I know, now it'd be a little more challenging, but I did it. It was only a few years ago. Climb on the tank, I jumped down, and there was a Reform rabbi right there, and she indicated that for her she wouldn't want to, of course. So she indicated that this is something that is problematic to her. In other words, in a positive way, her message was basically that a tank is something that you don't get excited when you see. it is something that should bring about pain. She's right, actually. She was right. It was a message I took from it. Yeah, I celebrated. She was mindful of the fact. Look at what this symbolizes. This was her message, and it's an important message if you contain it. Like many good ideas and concepts and teachings, you have to be sure to contain them properly, right? Because if you go too far with it, you have some serious issues. When you read in the beginning of Vahi bin Soharon, Vayomer Moshe, and we talk about Oyvecha, we talk about enemies, we talk about foes, is this really those who hate us? You realize that this is not an ideal section here. Ideally, we shouldn't have people hating us, where we're not happy about it, that we can protect ourselves, but this is not an ideal state. Let's clarify. There's a statement in the Jerusalem Talmud, and spelled out by the Rambam. And he deals with the question, we were in the wilderness as a nation. In Israel, there were people there. There were 7 nations there in different regions, right? What was their status? In other words, as we are preparing to enter, what were we planning to do with them? Right? That was like an interesting issue. What do you do in Israel with people who perhaps do not belong? This is a very, very significant issue that was dealt with already in biblical times. So we are told that Yehoshua sent them, informed them, that they have 3 options. 3 options were given to them. Option number 1 that was given to these nations there, that you go ahead and accept our existence, but you have to accept with it our values. You have to accept the 7 Noahite laws. So option number one is that they remain in the land of Israel. No need for them to leave. But they understand very well that this is a land given to the people of Israel by the God of Israel to live by the book, which is the Torah. And the Torah has requirements not just for us, but for humanity. You want to stay in Eretz Yisrael, no problem. These are the 7 Noachites law. You're going to be ethical even as you treat animals, the Ever Minachai concept, right? You're going to be sensitive to the significance of God. You're going to pray to God. You're not going to curse Him. Blasphemy has no place. You're going to go ahead and be ethical when it comes to monetary issues, right? You're going to go ahead and establish some kind of judicial system. You're not going to be Oved Avodah Zarah. You're going to respect the fact that adultery is destructive, and you're not going to kill. You accept those Noahite laws, and you accept the fact that we have the right to exist here. You are welcome to remain in the land of Israel. That was option number 1. Option number 2. This is sent by Yehoshua to the people who are in the land of Israel. Yeshua takes charge because he is the general, really, or he is the one that's leading our ancestors in. What's option number 2? Leave. Correct. Right? Transfer. Right? Transfer. You could go to Jordan, or sections of Jordan. You could go leave. Just leave. We'll let you leave. We're not going to harm you. We'll probably even hand you flowers as you leave. Right? And perhaps even as Moshe Feiglin wants at some point, to transfer a lot of Palestinians to Canada. So this is the idea that option number 2. Option number 3 is, you want war? We could learn it, right? We'll pick it up, right? Even though we were slaves in Egypt, and a Jew in the shtetl, or on sitting there on the Nile, has no clue how to pick up a gun, but we are a nation, and we all know stories of people who got off the boat, right, in Israel, 1948, and what were they handed? Shalom Aleichem, Bruchim Habayim, this, and he has to go ahead and figure out how to use it. By the next day he's at Latrun. This is what we are told. These are the 3 options that are sent. The 3rd option, obviously, is not the ideal option. But believe it or not, we could blame ourselves for that. In other words, if we would have been on the right spiritual level, we could have retained option 1. If we would have at least retained some spiritual level, meaning if our downfall wouldn't have been as great, we could have retained option 2. It is only due to the fact that we had these 2 significant downfalls that we reached the point where we unfortunately have to go to war. What would be the first one? In other words, let's work through it. the ideal option would be they remain in the land of Israel and they follow our teachings. Now, obviously, there would be a requirement for us to be on a high level. You cannot have your next door neighbor be someone who did not have the Jewish experience and not expect that he's going to have an impact on you. In other words, for you to have an impact on others, that's what really we're saying. They remain in Israel, you inspire them, right? You teach them, because that's our mission really, to teach humanity. We teach them, we inspire them, we help them grow spiritually. But obviously there's that challenge that when you are teaching, you might be taught as well. What happens if your kids are playing in the backyard and your little kid learned from Mahmoud, the little boy from next door, that you're supposed to go ahead and play with a little idol, right? Or even worse, little boy plays what Mahmoud plays, which is that you put on, for fun, a vest that has explosives. In other words, you have to be very concerned that the values are not going in the wrong direction. You know, I remember I studied in Milwaukee. In a kollel there. So one of the kollel fellows used to go a few times a week to Madison, Wisconsin to teach there in a college, in the university to teach, to interact, like a Hillel program, give them a little bit of Judaism, come with some food. And eventually he brought a few young people to be on campus itself. Now, I was told that the greatest challenge was to find the right people for the job, because it's not enough that they are good communicators and educators, but it has to be a personality that could be and Madison, by the way, takes great pride in the fact that for many years they were considered party college or number one. They were up there. In other words, if you want to go ahead and have fun, right, and you know what fun could mean on a college campus, Madison, Wisconsin was the place to be. So imagine bringing in some educators there. There's a gamble there, because it could be very well that the educator could be tempted into the environment that exists there. You have to be on the right level to be that educator. And our ancestors, when they fell with the sin of the golden calf, when they failed, when they had their first downfall, their first nephilah, they were no longer, it was impossible for them to be in the land of Israel with locals from the 7 nations who are far from ethical. It would be impossible to make the Jewish people the educators. That option is scratched. It won't work. It cannot work anymore. Option number 1 is off the table. What's option number 2? Option number 2, plan B. Ask them to leave. Please, please leave. Now, the truth is, the only way you could have a nation leaving, which is not natural, right? To send a letter, please leave your homes, right? We're not going to bomb you, right now. I mean, eventually we will. But please leave. It's not natural to expect them to pack out. However, it seems to be that if the Jewish people have this deep love for the land of Israel, and it's not a love, the average love that humanity has for their homeland, but it's a love that is rooted in the understanding that this was given to us by the God of Israel. When you have such a connection, you have the right to turn to someone and say, you know what, you don't belong there. And it could be, there's a concept in our tradition of nikarim divrei emet, that when you share with someone the truth, they recognize it. Right? Sometimes you have a conversation with someone, and sometimes you just sense the truth. And this is what could have occurred if the nation of Israel would have had this deep faith. It's our land, it's given to us, right? There'll be no challenges. This is something that is deeply ours because God loves us. Eretz Yisrael belongs to the people of Israel. They would send that message, and they would leave. We merited a little bit, if you think about it, in 1948. The fact is that when they established the state, many Palestinians left. The Israel that existed until 1967, they left, right? I still remember as a kid driving down roads where you would see, and they would point out that these were once upon a time villages of Palestinians. And if you think about it, it was in some ways, I have to be politically correct, but it was a gift from above, Because imagine if everyone would have remained, right? The challenge of numbers. There was a little bit of a gift from above, and without getting into the issue, what exactly occurred in Der Yassin, right? Which many of you, I'm sure, have heard of. But the reality is that there were those people who left, because we did merit to some extent in 48 to have, there was a love for the land. Now, obviously, it has to be a love for the land that is based on our tradition. The fact that the Torah gave us this land. There's no question about that. Option number 2 vanishes when? When do we no longer have that ability to tell them, you fellows, pack out? What did we do wrong? Because obviously we're Jews, we have to blame ourselves. When does that occur? With the sin of the Meraglim. You complain, you claim that the land of Israel, you don't have faith that the land of Israel is a good land? You don't think that the God of Israel is going to protect you and bring you into that land? So how can you expect the locals to just walk away when you want to go? And it's not going to happen if you don't have that deep attachment. So they're left with option number 3, which is the nun, which is the nefilah. And option number 3 is the entry that occurs in the days of Yehoshua when we conquer it. Now, there's something very interesting that we find in our history. Israel was conquered in the days of Joshua. And there are many areas. It was a very large area that was conquered. They are exiled to Babylonia, and they return in the days of Zerubbabel and Ezra, and they conquer a smaller area. We all know that in that smaller area, if items are grown, they have special laws that you have to tie them. Trumot, Ma'asrot, the land has sanctity which manifests itself with mitzvot. What happens if, let's say, you land up in Lebanon, somewhere in Lebanon, and you're an archaeologist, then you know that that exact location was settled by our ancestors during the first temple period, but not during the second temple period. Meaning the sanctification of the land that occurred in the days of Joshua applied to that area, but not the re-entry area. And you plant something there. Would those goods produced by the land have sanctity or not? And the answer is actually no. Because the sanctity of the land that took place in the days of Yehoshua was considered a weaker sanctity than the ones in the days of Ezra. So therefore, areas that were conquered in the first sanctity or in the first entry, in the first commonwealth, they lost their sanctity actually. Areas, on the other hand, that Ezra conquered, even with the destruction of the temple, still retained its sanctity. Why is it? So there is an explanation that is given, and that is that when we conquered Eretz Yisrael the first time, it was with a milchama. It was not that the nations of the world gave us a right to enter, but rather we conquered as warriors. When you conquer as a warrior, it's yours as long as you are present. You leave, you lose yet that right. On the other hand, the entry in the days of Ezra, they were granted permission by Koresh, by Cyrus. It was a stronger right to the land, because when the nations of the world, you have to realize, we're no longer on that level to send them letters that we are arriving and accept our values. We're no longer on that level to ask them to leave. You want to go ahead and enter and conquer it, it's a very weak way of acquiring the land given to the people of Israel. When the nations of the world approve, that's like a little bit of a messianic concept, that the nations of the world accept our right to the land of Israel. That occurred in the days of Cyrus. And by the way, there's a verse in the book of Yeshayahu that Cyrus, Koresh, is called Mashiach. The term Mashiach is given to him. Not that he was the Messiah, but there was a little spark there, a messianic spark that gave him this, that by him giving us the right to the land, it becomes indeed ours for eternity. The sanctity that was placed during Second Temple period was never ever lost. So this is what we are being told. This is what is being referred to here. It is a nefilah, it is a fall, but you should know that as you begin this journey, you have to be optimistic. When you think about the events of the 20th century, and you think about the United Nations, right? And we've all seen the footage of people sitting there by their radios in November of 1947, tuning in to the count for this, when they voted on partition, they needed a two-third count, and I think there were 33 nations. I don't remember the precise numbers, but people had to sit there and tally what nations will be a yes and which ones would be a no. And obviously the United States played a significant role in it. And you think about the fact that the United Nations as an entity granted Jews land in Israel. Now think about it from that point on everything else coming from the United Nations, right? Where up until, I would say up until a few months ago, was one big mess. Their whole essence, if you go ahead and count who they are criticizing, it is obviously Israel. We view it also as like a gift from above, but there's an understanding that you have to be on the right level to really maximize it. When you study the book of Zechariah, the book of Zechariah talks about a return to the land of Israel. And he addresses issues like Rabbi Terziner spoke about it on Yom Tov. Should they continue fasting on Tisha B'Av or not? This was a question they had. Why did they have that question? They are returning from Babylonia. They have a presence in the land of Israel. But many Jews are still in Babylonia. Their temple, even though they have a temple, this is no temple like the first temple. There were many miracles that occur in the first temple that are not present there. There's a question mark about their status. And Zechariah prophesizes about better days that are going to come. And among his statements, he mentions that you should know that a day will come where Prazot Teshev Yerushalayim, where Yerushalayim is going to be considered an open city in biblical times. You would label a city either an open city, a Prazot, or an ear that has a Choma. When Yerushalayim was always identified as a city with a wall, but Zechariah has a vision that a day is going to come where there's going to be such an explosion of population that it's going to be an open city. So again, something that would not be imaginable until the 1860s was when Montefiore begins the process of establishing neighborhoods outside. Now, if you think about this book of Zechariah, he is addressing a nation that in that era, as they are establishing their second commonwealth. But clearly at the same time, he's having a vision that relates to something in the future. And you try to understand why is it presented in such a way? A vision about that period and then a vision about the future. And this is a very important rule whenever you study Tanakh, that when these prophets have expressed what they see things not on a chronological order, but with concepts. In other words, they see a concept known as Jews returning to the land of Israel. They see that concept. So the concept manifests itself in some ways as it relates to what was occurring in his days. But at the same time, the vision had within it that which is going to occur in the future, in 2,500 years from now. I'm not even sure if the prophet exactly was able to take it apart, because it was presented to him in a vision of Jews returning. He saw Jews returning, but at the same time he sees a vision of something that is going to occur. So the vision of Yerushalayim being a city that expanded to such an extent that it's not going to be considered a walled city. He sees it. He doesn't know if that is going to occur right now, which it did, or perhaps in 2,500 years from now, right? This is the vision that Zechariah has. Now, when God Almighty brings them back during the Second Temple period, and we all agree this was not an ideal structure. We are told that when they were built the second Bet HaMikdash, and the young generation were all happy, the elders cried. Why were the elders crying? They were crying because they remembered the first temple. And they knew that this ain't anything like the first temple. The first temple was far greater. So now, when you have a downgraded version of something that was magnificent, why was it given to you? It was given to you, commentators know, because they could utilize it to pray to the Almighty, to improve and maximize what was given to them, and thus merit a complete redemption. It did not succeed, but I think that clearly gives us an idea of what is occurring today in the state of Israel. Last night, I was at Shoppers. And as I'm walking out, I see on the stack, usually it's far more important magazines that I see, like People magazine, because you need to know what Kate is wearing. But this time it was The Economist. The Economist, which I was quite surprised to see The Economist locally. Anyone get The Economist? Aha. So you're going to save for me this week's Economist, if possible. Because the front cover was, Why Israel Needs a Palestinian State. You saw it?
Yeah, it's 2 weeks old.
It's 2 weeks old, so you threw it out already.
No, I feel.
You stole the grandchildren and then destroyed it. Okay.
Oh, maybe they did.
Okay. So now,
They did.
why? So why is it still out there? Okay, Shoppers. I can imagine what the medicine is from. So here you have and you start thinking. Your head starts spinning, right? That they're here, the economists, right? The British now, are here to help us why we need a Palestinian state. And here you have a state that, if you look at the chinuch, right, what are the kids being taught? That's the number one issue that should be asked. That's the number one issue that should be addressed, right? Not land and not maps and not Temple Mount. What are the kids being taught? And I think we know very, very well what they are being taught. And here we have the world telling us, right and left, right? We're getting a little bit of a break now. We're getting a break now, right now, it seems, it appears. But the direction of things is problematic. We need a Palestinian state where the chinuch is. Are they accepting our existence? Obviously not. And these question marks are unsettling, right? If you want to go ahead and start planning, thinking ahead 20, 30 years, very unsettling. As people of faith, we have to understand that it's a time of opportunity, that when we do what we should be doing in Eretz Yisrael, which is teaching the values of Torah, living by them, loving one another, appreciating the God of Israel. And they, by the way, are occurring every single day in so many places there. Obviously, the media is not, and the news, and even Israeli news, is not going to be sharing the good stories, but they exist. When we are there and utilizing what this land is for and growing in the right direction, we don't have to worry about the external issues. Because just as what we read in this week's parasha, the challenges, right, are only due to the fact of us not doing what we should be doing. If we would have had the faith standing there at Mount Sinai and not constructing the golden calf, if we would have had faith and not, as we're going to read next week, not go ahead and lose faith that the God of Israel will protect us in the land of Israel, we wouldn't have had these external issues. External issues need to be ignored. Not completely if you're a politician, but if you're the average Jew, and if Netanyahu is not coming to you for advice, your son has to worry about these things. But I'm not an advisor. I don't have to have a solution to these issues. All I need to know is that I have a spiritual responsibility, which is the values of Torah, the kindness, the chesed, Torah chesed, Torah, avodah, gemilut chasadim. When I focus on that, other things come in place. That's the direction of what we're supposed to take away from a parsha that talks about downfall. Remember, it's the attitude that you have to change. But the good news is, at least in my opinion, and anyone who's there in Israel and opens their eyes, realizes that the good is only increasing. It's a much better state than it was in the past, and therefore we must be optimistic, despite the fact that we read articles in The Economist that indicate otherwise. Thank you so much for coming, everyone, and have a wonderful day.